You're watching HuffPost Live. I'm Ricky Camilleri. Here on HuffPost Live a few weeks back, we had a conversation about internet trolling. One of our guests was infamous internet hacker and troll Andrew Weev Auernheimer. On that segment, Weev told us about one of his most notorious projects where he exposed a flaw in AT&T security for the very first iPad. Let's take a look at that.
See, which is a common internet meme of a man holding open his anus about this wide. And I made it an inexorable part of AT&T's corporate history by, revealing a series of flaws in their infrastructure under the name Goatsy Security, motto, of course, gaping holes exposed. And there's all sorts of things you can do. I mean, I did a good jam on Amazon a few years ago that dropped their market cap by a couple billion. Like, there's a great way to confront a company that makes people lose faith in that company.
Now, last Tuesday, Weev was convicted in federal court for identity theft and conspiracy to gain unauthorized access to computers. He now faces up to 10 years in jail and will appeal the verdict. His conviction raises some serious concerns from internet security researchers as well as average web users who say this could have a chilling effect on internet freedom. Joining us to discuss this is Andrew Weev Auernheimer. Welcome back, Weev.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. I'm sorry that you were recently convicted.
Nobody needs to say, I'm sorry. It's not a bad thing. It's a blessing. The Bible says in Luke 6:22, "Blessed are ye when they shall hate you, and separate you from their company, and reproach you, and cast out your name as evil." And to be hated by a society that hates freedom, hates the expression of liberty, and hates people, talking about people in power in a negative manner, this is a good thing. This is something that throws open the gates of heaven for you.
And you're appealing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. On what grounds are you appealing? How is this case? How have you been wronged? How is this a wrong case?
The statute that my conviction hinges upon is the CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And this law was written in 1986. HTTP didn't exist, the internet didn't exist. And if you were accessing a remote server, you were dialing up that server specifically. You were entering a password into a password prompt, and then you were accessing some sort of serious industrial device. These days, servers are something that we access all the time. You don't have Google's permission to do a Google search. They've never given you a letter that gives you permission to do that. And what the government is arguing here, and what really the law says, is that a protected system is anything with a network connection. Every server you visit, every website you go to is under the law a protected system. And if any time the web operator decides, well, I just don't like you, I don't like what you say, then after the fact, the government, the corporation in question, they can declare your access unauthorized and have your door kicked in, have you arrested and indicted like me. The CFA is a civil as well as a criminal statute. They can sue you. It's just basically against the principles of our Constitution. AT&T admitted on the stand, we published this. We published this data. It was on the open internet, unprotected. And after they publish it, I use it to criticize them, and they get to say, well, that's not what it was for. You're not allowed to use what we say to criticize us, which is ridiculous.
Well, there's a number of ironies here, which is that you self-identify as a hacker, you have in the past. People identify you as a hacker, but in this particular situation, would you say you actually hacked anything?
No, this was the aggregation of public data and the dissemination of that data to a journalist. There was no hacking here. There was no breaking and entering. This was literally data that AT&T admits they published on an open web server on the open internet.
Right. And so they're prosecuting you because you took it to the media rather than approaching them with the security flaw.
Correct. Absolutely.
Now, why not approach them if you were a security firm, which you were kind of a security firm?
Absolutely.
Why not approach them with the flaw rather than Gawker?
Well, that's a great question, and the reason is that if you approach them directly, some people are threatened with extortion charges. Some people are given injunctions, and if you consider your obligation to the public record, to transparency, then it is not useful. You can't do comment and criticism and have a direct dialogue with AT&T. So I did give AT&T a chance to patch this flaw before I went to Gawker. Before Gawker received the list, the web server was patched. They had shut the feature in question off. They had stopped publishing this data. But I went to them and I informed them through the press to make sure they had it on, they knew I'm going to either have a transparent dialogue with you, everything is going to be on the record, or I'm not going to talk to you at all. And there was no there is no middle ground for me. I'm not here to play nice with AT&T. I'm here to comment and criticize, and reporting it to them is sort of antithetical to my goals.
What are your goals?
My goals are to comment and criticize AT&T.
Well,
not AT&T specifically, but in this case, AT&T.
You were born to comment and criticize only AT&T.
Yeah. In this case, my goal is I want to issue criticism on AT&T and Apple, and so that.
What about those companies do you stand against?
I think Apple has really pioneered, as Richard Stallman said, the idea of a computer is a jail-made hip. These are devices which spy on you, which illegally disseminate things to your telephone company. I mean, we should have a sense of ownership. When you buy a phone, when you buy a computer, it should be yours, and it shouldn't betray you with some hidden spyware.
And so what have you done with Apple to highlight that spyware?
My issue is not necessarily highlighting the spyware, but highlighting potential security and privacy flaws. Before the iPad 3G thing with the AT&T web server, I also discovered a vulnerability and published information on it in the Safari web browser. I think my job here is sort of an aggressive public critic, and I'm going to continue pursuing that.
So as well as a critic, you're also out to, would you say that you're out to sort of save the public from having their security breached?
I don't think I can save the public. Only the public can make their decisions on what they buy, how they buy. That's not my job. My job is to put something out there that really aggressively criticizes the corporations in question, and then people can make an informed decision. I'm not telling you what to buy. I'm not telling you not to buy an iPad or an iPhone. I wouldn't buy one, but if you don't know how you're compromised, then you can't make a reasonably informed decision as to what to buy and where to put your money.
I want to take a step back and talk about the trial again. Do you feel like you received a fair trial? Were you railroaded, in your opinion?
I think that there is a certain level of unfairness, and that they presented things from internet culture, from literally things I wrote for satirical websites as factual statements. It's sort of sad that you can't really say anything revolutionary or even humorous in America without it being turned around to make you look like a criminal.
Well, there were certain things, just to play devil's advocate here, there were certain things that I'm sure they brought up. You have a notorious history of trolling, of hurting feelings on the internet, if you will.
Absolutely.
And so do you feel like you were tried more because of your personality and the things that you have, the sort of more trollish things that you've done on the internet in the past, or because of the security flaws with AT&T?
Well, I think the FBI has a long history of pursuing me. They tried to frame me for terrorism once. They don't like me. Like, they viscerally
Step back.
dislike me.
How did they try to frame you for terrorism? Let's just hear that story.
In 2008, I'm a very vocal critic of Zionism on the internet, but I love my Jewish friends and I love the Jewish community. But in 2008, what I believe to be an FBI informant called in a series of threats to synagogues in Portland, and then they went around saying I made threatening phone calls to synagogues, tried to make me look like a terrorist, just things like that. Like the FBI has a very visceral, personal dislike for me, and I think the evidence of the trial shows that the FBI contacted AT&T and said, we think there's a crime here. And one of the AT&T employees was even like, I don't see why they're doing this. There's not a case. I just don't see it. No security was bypassed. That was the words of R. David Halsey from AT&T. So I think the FBI has a personal vendetta against me, some high-ranking officials, and they've really pursued me very strongly for a number of years, and they've just finally found something that they want to put me in prison on.
Well, you bring up an interesting point talking about the FBI like this, and we have right now the press release, I have it right here on my computer, the press release for your conviction.
Yeah.
FBI press release, New York man convicted of hacking AT&T service. Now this is kind of the FBI boasting.
Yeah.
It's a press release, they're boasting about having you convicted.
Yeah.
And do you see any irony with this, and within the last couple of weeks with the Petraeus scandal, where that was basically the FBI going through emails?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, the email that kicked off, the supposed threatening email of the Petraeus scandal, literally the words were, I know what you're doing. It's not anywhere near a criminal threat. And the FBI leverages this to get a series of warrants to eventually unseat David Petraeus. I mean, just the irony of them seriously violating the privacy of David Petraeus and the woman he sleeps with on the basis of likely he made a series of political comments suggesting Israel's a strategic burden, and then they combed through his entire life to try to get him out of office. That is a seditious undermining of liberty, of freedom, of somebody's right to have an opinion. It's a punitive punishment for him expressing his honest idea.
So who do you think is a bigger troll, you or the FBI?
Oh, I don't think the FBI is out to advance the nature of man's thought. I wouldn't qualify them as an internet troll. Their weapon is not rhetoric. Their weapon is violence and thuggery.
Interesting. So they're worse than a troll.
Oh, certainly. I mean, the FBI regularly murders American citizens. I mean, they shot Vicki Weaver in the back at Ruby Ridge as she held her infant child. They get away with murder. You know? If they get away with murder, they can get away with everything.
So they could easily get away with trolling.
They could, but I just don't. I don't see in the FBI agents' eyes a sense of love of joviality or humor. I don't think they have a troll spirit in them.
Were your emails ever read by the FBI?
Oh, certainly, yeah. Everything I've ever written has been cataloged by a federal agent. They said in the first search
Did
warrant.
you read any emails when you had the
Oh, no.
lists?
I would never compromise somebody's privacy. I mean, you have the right to private communications. Our Constitution assures that, and I would never break into somebody's email account. This was a list of email addresses in question. It was published by an AT&T server, by AT&T's own words. I've never violated anybody's privacy like that.
Even though you had access to generals, the email of major American generals, you had access to. Did you have access to Michael Bloomberg's email off the iPad?
I think that I had access to his email address supposedly. I mean, I never saw it. It was a big list. I didn't even actually hold the list, but you know, point being is I'm aggregating public data and using it to criticize people whose politics I dislike. The FBI is combing through people's emails, private emails, grossly violating their constitutional rights to punish those who dare speak a political idea that they don't like. So I think I have moral superiority here.
So now, last Tuesday you were convicted. You're facing up to 10 years in prison.
Yes.
When is the sentencing?
It's February 25th, if I recall correctly.
And you're appealing before then?
Absolutely.
Okay. Say your appeals don't go through. Are you scared of going to prison?
Not at all. I think it's a sign of a dying society that we lock our true criminals up in, that we put our true criminals in places of power, and we leave our real heroes and kings in a prison cell. I don't think that.
So you see yourself as a hero or a king?
I wouldn't say that, but I've met a lot of noble people in prison, and I'll be in good company.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with the people in a federal prison.
How long did you spend in prison prior?
40 days and 40 nights exactly.
Yeah.
Very
40 days and 40 nights. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who say leading up to prison, they weren't expecting it to be a certain way, or they kind of, you know, has it hit you that you might go to prison?
Oh,
you're not scared at all?
I certainly understand I might go to prison.
For 10 years?
That's a possibility. I haven't counted it out. And I'm willing to do whatever. I mean, in the grand scheme of our constitutional rights, my life is not that important. Like I could die. I mean, you have to be willing to accept when you fight the government is they murdered people at Ruby Ridge. They burnt 80 people to death at Waco for the expression of their civil liberties. They're willing to kill you. If you are willing to die, then you shouldn't get in this fight.
So you've become a fighter at this point.
I'm inherently a fighter.
I want to show a quick clip of you in the past where you call yourself an absurdist and not a fighter. Can you roll that clip?
Really, when you look at the government and what's going on, you know, you have the choice of, you know, refusing to acknowledge it, just sort of brainwashing yourself and just accepting it, or you can fight it, and you typically go to prison. But I've chosen to become an absurdist and just break whatever I want because that's really the best thing you can do. You're fucking rambling. I know. I'm tripping pretty hard.
Okay, so with the punchline at the end aside, I mean, my question is, you call yourself a fighter now. At that time, you call yourself an absurdist. As an absurdist, you're sort of referring more to trolling, I think.
I think that revolutionary movements have frequently been sort of led into by humor. We had the Sabot in France. We had the Boston Tea Party in America, and I think that revolutionary people are laughing, at the pure absurdity of this place. This is a mental asylum, And if you are not laughing at how purely funny it is, then there's something wrong with you.
I want to bring our community in. We've got a great hangout joining us. We have Derek Bombauer, professor of law at the University of Arizona, Jerry Smith, a technology reporter at the Huffington Post, and Jennifer Granick, director of civil liberties at the Stanford Center for Internet and Society. I apologize, Jennifer, for my stumbling on that one. Jerry, you've covered Weev's story for a little while now. So what are you taking from this?
Well, I haven't actually been covering Weev's story, but I do think it's interesting that there's
Jerry,
this
just lie next time I do that. Just say you have. Go ahead.
No, I do think what's interesting in the broader security community is that there are security researchers, a lot of them out there, who their job is to be, so-called white hat hackers. They spend their days trying to hack into, various technology products, and then when they find a flaw, they bring it to the company and said, "Hey, I found this flaw. I thought you should know, and you should patch this." And I think there's a question of how long do you wait before, if they ignore you, then do you go public? But a lot of what goes on is the researchers will find a flaw, they'll bring it to the company patches it, and that's it. And I guess with Andrew, I just was curious, whether he has any regrets at all about how he went about disclosing this flaw and going public with it, as opposed to try and work with AT&T.
I regret playing nice, giving AT&T a chance to patch. I regret a lot of things. I don't regret what I did. I have the right to use a company's publications to criticize them, and anybody who says otherwise is opposed to the principles of our Constitution.
Jennifer, what sort of ripple effects do you see stemming from Andrew Weev's conviction?
Well, these things, when they happen, sort of send a chill through the security community. People are dealing in this very vague legal regime. They have a problem trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. It's very case specific. It's very company specific. And when people hear that somebody's gone to prison or might go to prison, it really scares people. And so one of the real concerns that I have is that there's this chilling effect, and the result is that when researchers find information, they don't tell anybody. They don't go to the company because they're afraid the company will report them to the FBI. They don't go to the press because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. And what happens is then only the people who are going to take the information and use it to harm the user end up having the advantage, because the rest of us don't know and can't fix the problem.
I want to go to a comment really fast, and I think everyone is sort of touching on this a little bit, but Andrew Wellheim, 1990, sort of says it right away. I don't disagree that people like this are needed. I think people like this, are you, are needed in the protection of the internet and the company's data. My question is, why can't he work for a company like SecureWorks and help us all?
That's a great question. I think that to be bound by the corporate rule generally prevents you from informing people. The corporate establishment, you have stuff like VUPIN, you have stuff like Dave Vitale's Immunity Inc., and these people make exploits. They sell them to corporations and governments. The exploits do not get patched. They are generally kept secret because that's the way that they're the most valuable. You don't ever get informed that manner. You don't know you're insecure, and a bunch of foreign entities now have this digital weapon to use against you. The idea that SecureWorks are out to help us all, that's ridiculous. SecureWorks is there to sell IDS signatures. That's what they're there for. They're not there to help you.
What is an IDS signature? Sorry.
Intrusion detection system. So
what is an intrusion detection system?
It fires an alert while it thinks you might be getting hacked.
Okay.
You also have to remember the people who started those companies started like Weev. They were hackers back in the old day when we all, we go to DEF CON together, and then they banded together in companies because that worked for them and it worked for their financial interests. But the idea that somebody has to do their research within the context of a particular business, no, they don't.
Derek, you're a professor of law. You're an associate professor of law at the University of Arizona. And how do you feel about this conviction?
I find it worrisome, and there are a couple of strange things about it. One is that Andrew seems to have been targeted not necessarily because of the research that he did, but because of some of the things that he wrote or said on IRC and in other media. And it was that there's a sort of a disjunction between hacker culture and the FBI, to say the least. And if you look at what he did with the information, it looks a little bit more like whistleblowing, and the sort of various things that he said or posts about what he might do with it never came to pass. And so I think that that's worrisome. It's a worrisome use of prosecutorial discretion. And the second thing Andrew himself touched on is that this law is amazingly broad. It covers every computer that's attached to a network. And then the whole game is figuring out what counts as unauthorized access. And so if AT&T had put up on their webpage, Andrew, you may not access this website, and then he does, formally under the FBI's theory, that makes him a computer criminal. And so much of this turns on even minor things like where in the country you do your research. If you do it in California.
Well, I think we lost you there. I'm going to move to a question. Do you think the average internet user is at risk based off of your conviction or the ripple effect of your conviction?
I think that a lot more internet users are going to be haunted by this precedent in my case. If the interpretation that they're going through in my case, so much more than the security community is on the chopping block. Everybody that uses an API transformatively, we're talking how many API mashup applications are there on the iPhone App Store? A hell of a lot. Even AT&T actually holds iPhone developer summits where people create mashup applications where they're taking APIs, which are feeds, automated feeds that are meant to parse output from digital services, and they use them in a way that wasn't necessarily intended by the creator of those APIs. Anybody that has a business that scrapes somebody else's web server is at risk for that web operator just being well, your competition, that's unauthorized access. I'm going to sue you in the ground. The feds are kicking in your door. I mean, it's an absolutely just mind-numbingly crazy precedent.
Jennifer, can you respond to that?
In terms of the precedent, yeah. I think it has, as I said, I think it has a chilling effect on other security researchers. They become scared.
But not just security researchers. What about just the average internet user? Can this have an effect on them?
I think that people want to know that when there is a product that breaches their privacy, they're going to find out about it. And they want to know whether, just like with identity theft or you have a report, they want to know whether they need to change their passwords, change their email address, keep themselves up to date. Maybe they don't want to do business with a certain company because of their security practices. So all of this is part of the ecosystem of information that is available to internet users so that we can make decisions for ourselves that help protect ourselves and our interests.
Yeah. Quick question for you. Last time you were on, you told us that you were federally barred from going near a computer.
Yeah, I couldn't touch that MacBook.
You could no.
I can't use it. I can't use computers at all.
Really? So even in the 90 days up until your sentence, you're still not able to?
That's correct. My bail conditions are still here.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so I communicate with you on Twitter.
I can use a smartphone.
You can use a smartphone because you can't code or anything on that.
Can't do that much on a smartphone, I suppose.
Are you having have you been having computer withdrawals?
Nah, I go. I've seen a lot of classical music. I go, and I used to get wasted at bars a lot. I mean, my life has certainly changed, but I've got no shortage of things to do. Great literature to read. It's not too bad.
Yeah, and so what are you going to do in these 90 days that you have?
On the list is jet ski paintball. I've always
jet skiing and paintballing at the same time.
Yes, that's correct. It's seems like a thing to do, and just have as much fun as possible, and whatever will be will be. I'm in God's hands.
And what about your co-conspirator Daniel Spitler?
I'm not in contact with him, so I wouldn't know what's up.
But he took a plea deal.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm sure he's getting probation.
Really?
Yeah.
And why didn't you take a plea deal?
Because I'm ethically obligated to fight this case all the way to the end. It doesn't matter if I'm destroyed or this ends terribly. This is about our right to criticize companies based on their own publications. I mean, if I can't use anything but their press release to criticize them, that's just nut job talk.
Do you resent Daniel at all for having taken the plea?
He's a scared kid. It's not his struggle. I mean, my struggle. I've been fighting a lot longer, and I'm willing to go a lot farther. I wouldn't resent anybody for not wanting the FBI to rip apart their life as they've done to me for so many years. It's a tough battle.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to fight, don't plea out.
So if you say you got probation from this and you were able to use a computer again, would you go back to the same tactics?
I'm going to continue making great art. I don't know what form that art will take, but I'm going to fight until I've got nothing left. And I would die for the Constitution easily.
Are you gonna make art in prison?
Absolutely.
How are you gonna make art in prison?
I wouldn't be the first person to write a great novel that changes society from a prison cell, and there's Core Links, which is the federal electronic messaging system. I'm sure somebody will be transcribing what I say to blogs and tweets, and I'll still be making great art from a prison cell, perhaps my best.
Great. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Jerry, Derek, Jennifer, thanks so much. Oh wait, hold on.
CFAADefenseFund.com is our fund that my lawyer Tor Eklund has created to fight the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
Great, thank you. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Weev, thanks so much for coming by. And you and I will be in touch before the 90 days is up. But,
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you were here before.
For sure.
All right.
For sure.
You're watching HuffPost Live. Stick around for what's next.